Hello Year 6 and welcome to a new day of guided reading. Now today we're going to actually try and finish this chapter, but we might not get there, we'll see. We'll see how much we can read in about 15 minutes, and if we do finish it, then we're going to have a activity to do at the end. It was full morning when he awoke. One of the dwarves had fallen over him in the shadows where he lay, and had rolled down with a bump from the platform onto the floor. It was Boffer, and he was grumbling about it. When Bilbo opened his eyes, "Get up, lazy bones," he said, "or there'll be no breakfast left for you." Up jumped Bilbo. "Breakfast!" he cried. "Where's breakfast?" "Mostly inside us," answered the other dwarves, who were moving about the hall. "But what is left is out on the veranda. We've been about looking for Bjorn ever since the sun got up, but there's no sign of him anywhere, though we found breakfast laid as soon as we went out." "Where is Gandalf?" asked Bilbo, moving off to find something to eat as quick as he could. "Oh, out and about somewhere," they told him, but he saw no sign of the wizard all that day until the evening. Just before sunset he walked into the hall, where the hobbit and dwarves were having supper, waited on by Bjorn's wonderful animals, as they had been all day. Of Bjorn they had not seen and heard nothing since the night before, and they were getting puzzled. "Where is our host? Where have you been all day yourself?" they all cried. "One question at a time, and none till after supper. I haven't had a bite since breakfast." At last Gandalf pushed away his plate and jug. He had eaten 2 whole loaves, with masses of butter and honey and clotted cream, and drunk at least a quarter of mead, and he took out his pipe. "I will answer the second question first," he said, "but bless me, this is a splendid place for smoke rings." Indeed, for a long time they could get nothing more out of him. He was so busy sending smoke rings dodging round the pillars of the hall, changing them into all sorts of different shapes and colours, and setting them at last chasing one another out of the hole in the roof. They must have looked very queer from outside, popping out into the air one after another, green, blue, red, silver grey, yellow, white, big ones, little ones dodging through big ones and joining into figure eights, and going off like a flock of birds into the distance. "I've been picking out bear tracks," he said at last. "There must have been a regular bears meeting outside here last night. I soon saw that Bjorn could not have made them all. There were far too many of them, and they were of various sizes too. I should say there were little bears, large bears, ordinary bears, and gigantic big bears, all dancing outside from dark to nearly dawn. They came from every direction, except from the west over the river, from the mountains. In that direction only one set of footprints led, none coming, only ones going away from here. I followed these as far as the Carrock. There they disappeared into the river, but the water was too deep and strong beyond the rock for me to cross. It is easy enough, as you remember, to get from this bank to the Carrock by ford, but on the other side is a cliff standing up from a swirling channel. I had to walk miles before I found a place where the river was wide and shallow enough for me to wade and swim, and then miles back again to pick up the tracks. By that time it was too late for me to follow them far. They went straight off in the direction of the pine woods on the east side of the Misty Mountains, where we had a pleasant little party with the wargs the night before. And now I have answered your first question too," ended Gandalf, and he sat long while silent. Bilbo thought he knew what the wizard meant. "What shall we do?" he cried. "If he leads all the wargs and goblins down here, we shall all be caught and killed. Thought you said he was not a friend of theirs." "So I did, and don't be silly. You'd better go to bed, your wits are sleepy." The hobbit felt quite crushed, and as they seemed nothing else more to do than go to bed, and while the dwarves were still singing songs, he dropped asleep, still puzzling his little head about Bjorn, till he dreamed a dream of hundreds of black bears dancing slow heavy dances round and round in the moonlight in the country yard. Then he woke up when everyone else was asleep, and he heard the same scraping, scuffling, snuffling, and growling as before. Next morning they were all wakened by Bjorn himself. "So here you all still are," he said. He picked up the hobbit and laughed. "Not eaten up by wargs or goblins or wicked bears yet, I see," and he poked Mr. Baggins's waistcoat most disrespectfully. Little Bunny is getting nice and fat again on bread and honey, he chuckled. Come and have some more. So they all went to breakfast with him. Bjorn was most jolly for a change. Indeed, he seemed to be in a splendidly good humour and set them all laughing with his funny stories. Nor did they have to wonder long where he had been or why he was so nice to them, for he told them himself. He had been over the river and right back up into the mountains, from which you can guess that he could travel quickly, in bear shape at any rate. From the burnt wolf glade he had soon found out that part of the story was true, but he had found out more than that. He had caught a warg and a goblin wandering in the woods. From these he had got news. The goblin patrols were still hunting with wargs for the dwarves, and they were fiercely angry because of the death of the great goblin, and also because of the burning of the chief wolf's nose, and the death from the wizard's fire of many of his chief's servants. So much they told him when he forced them, but he guessed there was more wickedness than that afoot, and that a great raid of the whole goblin army with their wolf allies into the land shadowed by the mountains might soon be made to find the dwarves, or to take vengeance on the men and creatures that lived there, and who they thought must be sheltering them. It was a good story, that of yours, said Bjorn, but I like it better now that I'm sure it's true. You must forgive me for not taking your word. If you lived near the edge of Mirkwood, you would take the word of no one that you did not know as well as your brother or better. As it is, I can only say that I have hurried home as fast as I could to see that you are safe, and to offer you what help I can. I shall think more kindly of dwarves after this. Killed the great goblin! Killed the great goblin! He chuckled fiercely to himself. What did you do with the goblin and the warg? Asked Bilbo suddenly. Come and see, said Bjorn, and they followed him round the house. A goblin's head was stuck outside the gate, and a warg skin was nailed to a tree just beyond. Bjorn was a fierce enemy, but now he was their friend, and Gandalf thought it wise to tell them their whole story and the reason of their journey, so that they could get the most help he could offer. This is what he promised to do for them. He would provide poor ponies for each of them, and a horse for Gandalf, for their journey to the forest, and he would lade them with food to last them for weeks with care, and packed so as to be as easy as possible to carry. Nuts, flour, sealed jars or dried fruits, and red earthenware pots of honey, and twice-baked cakes that would keep going a long time, and on a little of which they could march far. The making of these was one of his secrets, but honey was in them and in most of his foods, and they were good to eat, though they made one thirsty. Water, he said, they would not need to carry this side of the forest, for there were streams and springs along the road. But your way through Mirkwood is dark, dangerous, and difficult, he said. Water is not easy to find there, nor food. The time is not yet come for nuts, though it may be past and gone indeed before you get to the other side, and nuts are about all that grows that are fit for food. In there the wild things are dark, queer, and savage. I will provide you with skins for carrying water, and I'll give you some bows and arrows, but I doubt very much whether anything you find in Mirkwood will be wholesome to eat or drink. There is one stream there I know, black and strong with crosses, which crosses the path. That you should neither drink of nor bathe in, for I've heard that it carries enchantment and great drowsiness and forgetfulness. And in the dim shadows of that place I don't think you will shoot anything, wholesome or unwholesome, without straying from the path. That you must not do, for any reason. This is all the advice I can give you. Beyond the edge of the forest I cannot help you much. You must depend on your luck and your courage and the food I send with you. At the gate of the forest I must ask you to send back my horses and my ponies. But I wish you all speed, and my house is open to you if ever you come back this way again. They thanked him, of course, with many bows and sweepings of their head, and with many a "at your service, O master of the wide wooden halls." But their spirits sank at his grave words, and they all felt that the adventure was far more dangerous than they had thought, while at the time, even if they passed all the perils of the road, the dragon was waiting at the other end. All that morning they were busy with preparations. Soon after midday they ate with Bjorn for the last time, and after the meal they mounted the steeds he was lending them, and bidding him many farewells, they rode off through his gate at a good pace. As soon as they had left his high hedges at the east of his fenced lands, they turned north, and then bore to the northwest. By his advice they were no longer making for the main forest road to the south of his land. Had they followed the pass? Their path would have led them down a stream from the mountains that join the great river miles south of the Carrock. At that point there was a deep ford which they might have passed if they had not still had their ponies, and beyond that track led to the skirts of the wood and to the entrance of the old forest road. But Bjorn had warned them that this was now often used by goblins, while the forest road itself, he had heard, was overgrown and disused at the eastern end, and led to impassable marshes where the paths had long been lost. Its eastern opening had also always been far to south of the lonely mountain, and would have left them with still a long and difficult northward march when they got to the other side. North of the Carrock, the edge of Mirkwood drew closer to the borders of the great river, and through here the mountains too drew down nearer. Bjorn advised them to take this way, for at a place a few days' ride due north of the Carrock was the gate of a little-known pathway through Mirkwood that led almost straight towards the lonely mountain. The goblins, Bjorn had said, will not dare cross the great river for 100 miles north of the Carrock, nor to come near my house. It is well protected at night. But I should ride fast, for if they make their raid soon, they will cross the river to the south and scour all the edge of the forest so as to cut you off, and wargs run swifter than ponies. Still, you are safer going north, even though you seem to be going back nearer to their strongholds, for that is what they will at least expect, and they will have the longer ride to catch you. Be off now, as quick as you may. That is why they were now riding in silence, galloping wherever the ground was grassy and smooth, with the mountains dark on the left, and in the distance the line of the river with its trees drawing ever closer. The sun had only just turned west when they started, and still evening it lay, and in the evening it lay golden on the land about them. It was difficult to think of pursuing goblins behind, and when they had put many miles between them and Bjorn's house, they began to talk and to sing again, and to forget the dark forest path that lay in front. But in the evening, when the dusk came on, the peaks of the mountains glowered against the sunset. They made a camp and set a guard, and most of them slept uneasily, with dreams in which they came the howl of hunting wolves and the cries of goblins. Still, the next morning dawned bright and fair again. There was an autumn-like mist white upon the ground, and the air was chill. But soon the sun rose red in the east, and the mists vanished, and while the shadows were still long, they were off again. So they rode now for 2 more days, and all the while they saw nothing save grass and flowers and birds and scattered trees, and occasionally small herds of red deer browsing or sitting at noon in the shade. Sometimes Bilbo saw the horns of the hart sticking up out of the long grass, and at first he thought they were the dead branches of trees. That third evening they were so eager to press on, for Bjorn had said they should reach the forest gate early on the 4th day, that they rode still forward after dusk and into the night beneath the moon. As the light faded, Bilbo thought he saw away to the right, or to the left, the shadowy form of a great bear prowling along in the same direction. But if he dared to mention it to Gandalf, the wizard only said, "Hush, take no notice." Next day they started before dawn, though their night had been short. As soon as it was light, they could see the forest coming as if they were there to meet them, or waiting for them like a black and frowning wall before them. The Lambur hut began to slope up, and it seemed to the hobbit that a silence began to draw in upon them. Birds began to sing less. There was no more deer. Not even rabbits were to be seen. By the afternoon they had reached the eaves of Mirkwood, and were resting almost beneath the great overhanging boughs of its outer trees. Their trunks were huge and gnarled, their branches twisted, their leaves were dark and long. Ivy grew on them and trailed along the... Okay, and we're going to actually stop there for the day. So we've stopped there, and they've just reached the edge of Mirkwood, and we'll finish off chapter 6, because this chapter still has one little surprise for us, and we'll find out what that is tomorrow, and then you'll have a reading task. Well done for reading along with me, and we'll finish off the final part of the chapter and do a reading task tomorrow.